Hi, everybody. So sorry I didn't make the Zoom last week, but I still wanted to get a video with some strategies up here for you. So let's go through each of the arguments, and I'm not going to discuss the bioethical principles this time because I'm going to let you all just do that on your own since we've been through one already. The important part is that you choose for each your most and least emphasized. The important part is that you give a good justification of that, right? So if you say the most emphasized is respect for persons, for any of these arguments, give a good justification as to why. Back that up. That's the important part. And when you make your claim about the least emphasized bioethical principle, do the same. Just back that up and connect your supporting statements carefully to the principles in each case. Okay, so you're on your own with those bioethical principles, but I wanted to take a look at each argument and give you some possible strategies for them. And once again, you're under no obligation um, to follow my advice here. It's what I mentioned over and over in the last Zoom we did was that this is just a way through the woods. You can choose to evaluate the argument in the ways that I am recommending here, but you don't have to. You just have to make sure you use the concepts of strength and cogency well, and you choose the proper outline and hit all the marks. That's all. So, but you're welcome to use my recommendations if you want to. So, with no further ado, Sally Satel's argument, where she is arguing in favor of a regulated and transparent compensation program. She's talking about kidneys specifically. Let me remove this real quick. Oops, that was a bad idea. Let me bring that back. All right. Hey, so here's her argument. Under the status quo, we have a dual tragedy, the thousands of patients who die each year on the waiting list, and the human rights disaster of the black market. That's one reason we ought to institute a transparent compensation program. Two, a regulated and transparent compensation program would increase supply. Three, it would protect donors. Four, to avoid uneasiness over lump sum cash payments, in-kind rewards could be offered. Five, the only way to stop illicit markets is to create legal ones. Six, support for a donor compensation program is growing. And she is mentioning some professional support, right? So let's make that very clear here. This doesn't have to make your paper, but this is what she means. Um, so let's take a look. To evaluate for strength first, we assume that premises 1 through 6 are without question true, right? Just take them as a fact, just pretend like they're factual, and then ask yourself, if these were true, would this conclusion be supported? In other words, are these premises relevant to this conclusion and considered together? Do they provide good enough grounds? And I think that this is a fine argument. Again, strength induction is never perfect, but you can call an argument strong when it just isn't weak. So you can just say it's relatively strong, right? So again, these arguments have gone through peer review, and that's why they just don't really give. That's why I only offer you the two outlines, strong but uncogent or strong and cogent, because I just don't think these are examples of weak arguments. You're welcome to go a different way you want to, but that's not what we're going to talk about here. I'm going to say it's a relatively strong argument. So now that means you have to check for cogency. And um, I think the biggest problem with this argument is premise number 5. Because if you take a look, And she's got all this support for all of these, except for premise five. She just doesn't back it up. She kind of drops it in there as if it's, a universal law of nature. So that's one problem with this premise. Another problem with this premise is that when you say the only way to stop illegal markets is to create legal ones, that's equivalent to saying something like either create legal markets, or either create a legal market for kidneys or the black market will continue to thrive. And you've got experience with that fallacy now, right? The either or fallacy, which is a fallacy of cogency. You could say that this her whole argument, although strong, is uncogent because premise five is unacceptable or very problematic. First, it is a false dichotomy in disguise. The wording of this can be changed into, made explicit, and it made explicitly an either or statement, which would read either create a legal kidney market or the black market would continue to thrive. And that's the first problem. Those aren't the only two options available. And then you'd have to go on to, unpack the false dichotomy. What is a false dichotomy? Why is it a problem? How does this commit the false dichotomy fallacy? And then stop. But you could then take another swipe at this premise by saying, on top of that, she doesn't give any support for this premise at all. No sort of, even anecdotal evidence is given in support for this premise. So there's a few things that you could possibly say are wrong with premise five. At that point, your job, if you were to go the strong but uncogent route, your job would be to fix this premise. So if you break two things about the premise, then you have to fix two things, right? So you would want to say, um, premise five, this argument could be made cogent if, first of all, she changed the wording to something like one way to slow down illegal markets is to create legal ones, or one way to diminish the illegal kidney market is to create a legal one. Then you're not committing the false dichotomy fallacy. Then you'd have to fix the second part for this premise. She could also go on to offer some sort of, maybe even like historical evidence for the reworded premise. Like you all can probably think of some examples of where when when some substance has been made legal, or when some substance has been made legal, or some practice has been made legal, the black market in that substance or practice has diminished. Like you could say she could support this by mentioning um, alcohol during prohibition, and after prohibition was lifted, and what happened to the black markets. The black markets were diminished. Or even something more recent, you could talk about um, marijuana. When marijuana became recreationally legal in California, we saw a diminishment of that traditional black market. And she could use that to support the newly worded premise. And then you would conclude. Now, if you want to go the other way, the strong but cogent, strong and cogent route, you would say the argument's strong because the premises are relevant to the conclusion and considered together provide good enough grounds to justify it. And it's cogent because all the premises are true and or rationally acceptable. Boom, then that's it. This is again, if you're using the strong and cogent outline. then end section. Then you could use that same information I gave you and say, some may claim that her argument is strong but uncogent because premise five is unacceptable. These people may claim it's a false dichotomy. A false dichotomy is this sort of fallacy. These detractors may claim that this premise commits that fallacy. To them, I would answer that it doesn't. You just would have to say back, it doesn't, and then somehow support the idea that the only way to stop illegal markets is create legal ones. You can even look something like that up. It's not that big of a deal. It's more about your chops in these papers. Okay, so with that, where are we now? Okay, let us move on to the IOM's argument. Well, that's what I want to get out of there. Okay. So the IOM says a market in organs would be too problematic as a solution to the organ shortage. Just too many problems. They're not asking for too much here. They're just saying, perhaps you haven't thought about all the problems that are associated with this type of solution you're offering. Now, again, first we check for strength. Assume all the premises are true. Ask yourself, if all of them were true, would that conclusion be true as well? Would that conclusion likely be true as well? In other words, are the premises relevant to the conclusion and considered together? Do they provide decent grounds for it? And I say this is a fine argument too, logically speaking. You could say this is a strong argument. If you'd rather say relatively strong, that's fine as well. Then you could if you were going to go the uncogent route, here is where I think there might be an issue you could pick on for this side of the argument. You could say the IOM offers a strong argument. The premises are relevant to the conclusion and provide sufficient grounds to justify it. However, the argument is uncogent because premise two is problematic or unacceptable, or however you want to put it. And then let's walk through that. We can even just think about it on the face of it, right? Without even going into how it's justified. Cultural norms inhibit an increase in supply. And then she offers it's a group, offers a few pieces of justification for that. But, I think that something you could pick on about this argument, the way I would argue back, is I'd say, but the IOM may be treating cultural norms as if they are static, unchangeable, universal entities, when in fact cultural norms are very flexible and they seem to be getting more and more flexible. And also very often the norms don't change surrounding any issue until like the legislation changes, right? So you can think of something like same-sex marriage, and groups that just were like, no, groups that went crazy over same-sex marriage, they may still be going crazy over it, some of them, but it starts to become, once a practice is legalized somewhere and people get accustomed to it, and they start to realize we're still alive, everything's still fine, the earth didn't explode, then that norm starts to relax, and especially today, kind of quickly. So you could say, again, that's the gist of a complaint I might offer about premise two. could see, look at how many groups were up in arms about recreational marijuana, right? And it's just so much more. It became normalized rather quickly. It's not to say that everybody accepts it. That's not what a norm is, right? But but like something like uh, legal recreational marijuana became much more normalized. Everybody goes on with their lives, and the problem may be that the IOM is just treating cultural norms as if they wouldn't adapt to the practice. Hopefully, I'm being clear about what a potential argument, um, a potential problem with premise two could be. And, then you would say, you'd have to, after articulate that problem, you could then, what you need to do is fix the problem and decide how you would want to fix this premise. Uh, Again, sometimes you can slip extra verbiage in there, to soften their claim and make the argument cogent. They could simply say cultural norms may inhibit an increase in supply, and that would change the thrust of the premise. Um, you know, or again, you could, if you think that this is a sacrificable premise, you could say that it could be removed as well. But then, you have to take a look at the argument and ask yourself, if that was taken out, premise two entirely, would would the argument still be logically strong? Would the bones of the argument be strong? Like if can I remove this bone without the argument collapsing? And you'd have to address that. So you'd have to say something like, this premise can be what I would recommend so that the IOM could avoid this problem is that they remove the premise. It would still be it could still maintain logical strength upon the removal premise too, while at the same time avoiding the particular criticism that I just levied. And then, so that's the strong but uncogent side. On the flip, if you want to choose the strong and cogent, do the same thing. Arguments strong, premises are relevant to the conclusion and provide good grounds for it. However, sorry, let me back up. Argument is strong because the premises are relevant to the conclusion and considered together provide a good grounds for it. And the argument also is cogent because the premises are all true and or rationally acceptable. Boom, out of that section. Next section would start. Some may claim that the IOM's argument is strong but uncogent because premise two is problematic. They would say that ding, 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 everything we just talked about and dun, 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 dun. To them, I would reply that actually cultural norms inhibiting an increase in supply with something like organs might be even more likely than something like marijuana or alcohol. Just retort using that same kind of stuff that we just talked about before. Okay, I think that is about it. So for each argument, I've given you a strategy. You don't have to use them. You can use some, part, but not all. But I just wanted to remind you all, you're choosing to focus on one side or the other. That doesn't mean the side you choose doesn't mean that that's the side you believe in. Just choose the one that you think you could write the better paper on. And you can change your mind. If you did your discussion board saying that you were going to write on the IOM and you'd now rather do Satel, you can do that. But What we want is one or the other. So if you're focusing on Sally Satel's argument, don't discuss the IOM. If you're focusing on the IOM's argument, don't discuss Satel. And that is about it. And if you made it this far, just stick until the thing is all the way at the end, answer the multiple choice question, and that'll be an extra 10-point boost in the paper category. Okay, my friends, thanks for listening.